Have you ever felt it? That quiet, almost invisible feeling that something is off with someone in your life. They smile when you walk in. They laugh at your jokes. They say the right things. But somewhere underneath all of it, something does not add up. You cannot name it. You cannot prove it. And because you cannot prove it, you talk yourself out of it. You call yourself paranoid, oversensitive. You tell yourself you are reading into things, but you were not reading into things. Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. The most dangerous people in your world are almost never the ones who openly oppose you. They are the ones who have learned to hide it. The ones who have calculated, correctly, that open hostility is expensive. It creates enemies. It reveals position. It costs social capital. So instead, they do something far more efficient. They smile. They help. They stay close. And they wait. This video is going to change the way you see the people around you. Not to make you paranoid, but to make you precise. Because there is a massive difference between suspecting everyone and being able to read the specific, consistent behavioral patterns that Machiavelli documented across 5 centuries of human conflict, political maneuvering, and social warfare. By the end of this, you will know exactly what to look for. You will know the signs that someone in your life, maybe someone you trust right now, is operating against you while performing loyalty to your face. And more importantly, you will know what to do about it. Stay with me, because the third sign is the one most people miss completely. The sixth one is the one that has probably already cost you something you never got back. And the last sign, the one we are building to, is the most subtle, the most dangerous, and the one Machiavelli himself said was the mark of a truly skilled, hidden enemy. Let's get into it. Before we get into the signs, there is something you need to understand first. When you start rising, when you carry yourself differently, make sharper decisions, build something real, most people assume the people around them will be glad about it. Some will be. The genuine ones will be. But a certain kind of person, one that Machiavelli mapped with uncomfortable accuracy, will feel something else entirely. Threatened. Not because you did anything to them, not because you took something or said something, simply because your growth creates a contrast. And contrast is deeply uncomfortable for people who have decided to stay where they are. Here is what makes this hard. That feeling rarely announces itself openly. The person who feels smaller because of your progress almost never walks up and admits it. That would take a kind of honesty most people do not have. Instead, the feeling goes underground. It gets dressed in different clothes. It starts showing up in ways that are deniable and subtle enough that when you notice them, you can always be made to feel like you imagined it. That is the game. And the first step to not losing it is simply knowing it is being played. Machiavelli did not write The Prince to teach cruelty. He wrote it because he had watched capable, intelligent, well-meaning people get destroyed by enemies they never saw coming. Enemies who sat at their table, who shook their hand, who called them a friend. He wrote it so that would not happen to you. Let's talk about the signs. Sign 1. They celebrate your failures more than your wins. Pay close attention to how the people in your life respond when something goes wrong for you. Not the obvious response, not the ones who laugh openly or say something cutting. Watch the subtle version. The person who, when you share a setback, becomes slightly more animated than usual, slightly warmer, slightly more engaged, who leans in with questions that sound like concern but feel more like appetite, who lingers on the details of what went wrong in a way that has nothing to do with helping you fix it. Machiavelli called this the behavior of the hidden rival, the person whose emotional state moves in the opposite direction to yours. When you are down, something in them lifts. When you are up, something in them goes quiet. You have probably noticed the quiet version of this before. You share good news, a win, an opportunity, something you worked for, and the response from a specific person is flat. Technically correct. The right words are said, maybe even enthusiastically on the surface, but something is missing. The energy is not there. And if you pay close attention, the conversation moves on faster than it should. They redirect. They change the subject. They cannot hold your good news for very long because it costs them something to do it. That contrast, flat at your high points, suddenly warm and engaged at your low points, is not a personality quirk. It is information. Good things for you is energized by your wins and sobered by your losses. The person who secretly resents you experiences it the other way around. And the reason they cannot fully hide it, no matter how skilled they are, is that emotional reactions are faster than social performance. The real feeling lands on their face before the correct expression has time to replace it. Start watching the first half second before the performance begins. That half second does not lie. Sign 2. They give you advice that subtly keeps you small. This one is dangerous because it wears the costume of friendship so convincingly that most people never see through it. It sounds like this: I just don't want to see you get hurt. Are you sure that's realistic right now? I think you should be careful. I've seen a lot of people try that. Maybe just wait a little longer until the timing is better. Now, here is the important distinction, because I am not telling you that everyone who expresses caution is your enemy. People who genuinely love you will sometimes tell you hard truths. They will pump the brakes when they have good reason. They will share concerns that come from a real place. The difference is in the pattern. A person who cares about you challenges specific decisions with specific reasoning, and then supports you once you have heard them out. They do not have a recurring, consistent pattern of being the voice that talks you down from every significant move you try to make. The hidden enemy does. Think about the people in your life who have been consistently discouraging, not once, not twice, but as a pattern across time. Every time you have a plan, they find the flaw. Every time you have momentum, they introduce doubt. Every time the timing seems right to you, they suggest waiting. Machiavelli identified this as one of the most effective and least detectable forms of sabotage available to someone who cannot afford to oppose you openly, because they are not doing anything wrong. Technically, they are just advising, caring, looking out for you, and if you ever call them on it, they can always deny it, and convincingly. But the outcome is the same as if they had opposed you directly. You stay still, they remain unthreatened, and they never had to reveal a single card. The question to ask about anyone who consistently advises caution is not whether they sound reasonable. It is whether their advice, taken across time, has moved you forward or kept you exactly where you are. The answer will tell you everything. Sign 3. They undermine you indirectly, through other people. This is the one I told you most people miss completely. And the reason they miss it is that by the time it reaches them, the source has been completely removed from the equation. Here is how it works. The person who secretly resents you cannot afford to attack you directly. You are too close. The relationship is too visible. The cost would be too high. So instead, they work on your periphery. They plant seeds, small questions, casually asked, in conversations with people who matter to you. Do you think he's actually as capable as he seems? I hope he knows what he's getting into. Between you and me, I worry about his judgment sometimes. None of these statements are an attack. Each one, individually, sounds like concern, but they are being strategically placed in the minds of specific people, your employer, your circle, your potential allies, with one purpose: to quietly degrade your reputation with people who are not you, so that when opportunities arise, there is already a slight hesitation, a small pre-existing doubt, something they cannot quite name. Machiavelli wrote about this in the context of court politics, where it was a primary weapon of every effective political operator. He called it the art of poisoning the well, ensuring that by the time your enemy needs to act against you directly, the ground has already been prepared. The people around you already have a version of you that is slightly less impressive, slightly less reliable, slightly less deserving of the thing you are both competing for, and they don't even know where they got that version from. Here is how you detect it. Pay attention to subtle shifts in how people treat you, particularly people who have no direct reason to have changed. When someone who used to be warm becomes slightly more reserved with you, without a visible reason, ask yourself who the common thread is. Who do you both know? Who has access to both of you? Who benefits from the distance growing between you? Almost always, there is a common thread, and almost always, that thread leads back to someone who smiles every time they see you. Sign 4. They mirror your moves and compete quietly. There is a specific type of person who, rather than openly competing with you, watches you, studies you, and then replicates what you do, just far enough behind that it looks like coincidence. You start working on something. A few months later, they're working on something remarkably similar. You change your approach, your style, your direction. Not long after, a version of that shift appears in them. You mention an idea in passing. The next time you hear about it, it is coming from their direction, dressed in slightly different clothes. This is not always conscious. That is the honest thing to say. Sometimes imitation is the most sincere form of admiration, and it comes from a genuinely inspired place. But the version Machiavelli was describing is different, and the difference is in how they behave when the imitation is pointed out or noticed. A person who admires you and consciously or unconsciously picks up your influence will acknowledge it. They will laugh. They will credit you. They will be comfortable with the conversation. The hidden competitor will not. They will become defensive. They will establish an alternate origin story for whatever they are doing. They will work very hard to sever any visible connection between their direction and yours, because their entire strategy depends on you not realizing that they are measuring themselves against you as the benchmark. Watch how they respond to your success specifically in the areas where they are also trying to build. If your win in that space creates a visible, though quickly suppressed, tension, if you can see them recalibrating even as they offer congratulations, you are not dealing with a fan. You are dealing with a rival who has decided that pretending otherwise is cheaper than being honest about it. Sign 5. They test your boundaries under the cover of humor. Listen carefully, because this one hides in plain sight every single day, and almost no one calls it what it is. The person who secretly dislikes you, or who is quietly trying to establish dominance over you, will frequently use humor as the delivery mechanism for something that is not actually funny. It is a dig, a slight, an observation about your looks, your choices, your intelligence, your background, your ambition, your failures. But it is wrapped in a joke, and it is delivered with a smile, and it is made in front of other people, and the entire setup is designed so that if you react to what it actually was, a small attack, you are suddenly the one who cannot take a joke. Machiavelli understood that publicly humiliating someone, even in a small and deniable way, is one of the most efficient methods of social undermining available, because it does not just land on you, it lands on everyone watching. It establishes in the mind of the audience a dynamic that this person can speak about you this way and you will not or cannot respond effectively. Over time, with repetition, that dynamic becomes the invisible architecture of how the group sees the relationship between you. The tell is always the pattern. A friend who occasionally teases you about something and responds with genuine warmth when you push back is not the same as someone who consistently reaches for the same kind of joke, the kind that happens to always land on your most vulnerable or least confident area, and who watches your reaction just a half beat too carefully afterward. That watching is the giveaway. They are not checking to see if you found it funny. They are checking to see if it landed. They are assessing the damage, and the fact that they need to check tells you that somewhere underneath the performance of humor, they knew exactly what they were doing. You do not have to explode. You do not have to make a scene, but you do not have to pretend it was funny either. A calm, direct look, held for 1 second longer than comfortable, followed by a complete non-reaction and moving on, communicates something the comeback never could. It communicates that you saw it, and they will know that you saw it, and that knowing will make them think twice before doing it again. We are halfway through the list, and if you have gotten this far, something is probably surfacing for you. A face, maybe more than one face. Someone you know who matches one of these patterns, maybe several of them. Hold that. We are getting to the most important ones, because the signs we have covered so far are the ones you can catch if you know what to look for. The next ones are the ones that are specifically designed to be invisible. The ones that the most sophisticated hidden enemies, the ones Machiavelli was most concerned about, use precisely because they do not look like attacks at all. Stay with me. Sign 6. They are generous with you at the wrong moments. I told you at the beginning that the 6th sign is the one that has probably already cost you something. This is it. Most people operate on the assumption that generosity is always good, that someone who helps you, who gives to you, who shows up when you need something, that person is in your corner. Machiavelli would tell you that this is one of the most expensive assumptions you will ever make, because generosity, deployed strategically, is one of the most powerful control mechanisms that exists. Here is how it works. The person who wants to keep you within reach, who needs you to remain dependent, obligated, or emotionally indebted, gives to you at exactly the moments when you are about to become become independent of them. When you are close to not needing them anymore, they do something generous. When you are building enough momentum to pull away from the relationship, they show up in a way that resets your debt counter. When you are starting to see through them, they become suddenly warm, suddenly giving, suddenly the version of themselves that you originally trusted. This is not coincidence. It is calibration. Think about the relationships in your life where you have felt perpetually indebted but never actually gotten ahead, where the balance never quite clears, no matter how much you reciprocate, where every time you reach a point of equilibrium, where you can breathe, where the obligation feels settled, something new is placed on the scale. That feeling of permanent debt, of never quite being free, is not an accident in those relationships. It is the point. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who gives gifts to his subjects is not simply being kind. He is purchasing something: compliance, presence, the continued right to be needed. The hidden enemy in your life has understood this without ever reading a word of political philosophy. They have simply learned, through instinct or observation, that keeping you obligated keeps you manageable. The way out is not ingratitude, it is awareness. When a sudden act of generosity comes from someone who you have been slowly seeing more clearly, notice the timing. Ask yourself what was shifting in the relationship before it arrived. What were you about to do, or not do, or finally stop doing? What did this generosity interrupt? The answer will be more honest than anything they ever say to you directly. Sign 7. They make you feel guilty for growing. This one cuts deepest, because it does not come from enemies usually. It comes from people who are close enough to you that their words carry weight. You make a change. You decide to spend your time differently, to invest in something new, to cut a habit, to distance yourself from certain conversations. And instead of support, you get a specific kind of quiet pressure, not opposition, guilt. The implication that your growth is a kind of abandonment, that becoming more is somehow a statement about them, that your progress reveals a judgment of their stillness. You've changed, said not as a compliment. You used to be more fun, said at exactly the moment when fun meant something that was costing you. I don't know who you are anymore, said by someone who knew you when you were more manageable. Machiavelli understood that the most effective chains are the ones a man puts on himself, and that the people who benefit from your limitation are highly skilled at handing you those chains, while making you feel like you chose them freely. The language of guilt is perfect for this, because it weaponizes your own decency against you. If you are a good person, if you care about the people in your life, the suggestion that your growth is hurting them is almost impossible to dismiss without examining, and that examination takes time, energy, momentum, which is exactly the point. Here is the thing I need you to understand. Your growth is not an attack on anyone. Your discipline is not a criticism of their indiscipline. Your ambition is not a judgment of their contentment. These things are true if they are true, meaning, if you are not doing any of this to show them up, if you are doing it for yourself, then the guilt they are asking you to carry is not yours. It is a tax, collected by people who have a financial interest in you staying at the level where they can reach you. You are allowed to refuse to pay it. Sign 8. They work to isolate you from people who would elevate you. A hidden enemy rarely just attacks you. They manage the landscape around you. And one of the most efficient landscape management tools available is quiet, gradual, deniable interference with your access to people who would help you rise. It might look like this. You mention someone you have been building a relationship with, someone impressive, someone in a position to help you, someone who sees what you are capable of, and the person who secretly works against you begins, gradually and casually, to plant doubt about that connection. Small questions. Are you sure they're as genuine as they seem? Small observations. I've heard things about them. Nothing specific, just be careful. The implied suggestion that this new person in your life is untrustworthy, dangerous, or not what they appear. The goal is not to protect you. The goal is to keep the circle small, to ensure that the people with access to you remain the people who can be relied upon, not to expand your understanding of what you are capable of. Because the moment someone who genuinely believes in your potential gets your attention, the dynamic the hidden enemy has spent months or years building begins to break down. Machiavelli wrote that a prince should be extremely wary of advisors who consistently steer him away from other capable men, because anyone who isolates you from allies has, at minimum, an interest in keeping you dependent, and at maximum, an active agenda in your limitation. Look at your current circle and ask yourself honestly, has anyone in it, consistently, over time, discouraged you from relationships, opportunities, or environments that would have required you to think bigger? Has anyone in it benefited from you remaining in a space where they are the most capable, the most knowledgeable, the most advanced person you have regular access to? That question alone might be the most important one in this entire video. Sign 9. They volunteer information about you that you did not ask them to share. Information is currency, and the person who secretly works against you knows this more instinctively than they know almost anything else. They share things about you, your struggles, your setbacks, your private decisions, your fears, your doubts, in rooms you are not in, with people you cannot monitor, at moments you will never be aware of. Always framed as concern, always delivered with the tone of someone reluctantly sharing something they are worried about. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I'm a little worried about him. He shared this with me in confidence, but I feel like you should know. The information itself is rarely catastrophic. It does not have to be. The effect it has is not about the specific content. It is about the cumulative impression it builds. Over time, in the minds of the people around you, a picture forms. A picture of someone who is struggling more than he appears, less stable than he projects, less ready than he presents himself to be. Not because these things are true, but because the person feeding that picture has been curating it carefully for an audience you never knew you had. Machiavelli was precise on this point. The man who controls the narrative about you in rooms where you are absent controls a version of you that you will never be able to directly defend, because you cannot rebut something you do not know is being said. You cannot correct a story you were never told was being told. The defense against this is not paranoia. It is selectivity. It is being genuinely thoughtful about who in your life receives your vulnerabilities, your doubts, your unfinished thoughts, not because you have to perform perfection for everyone, but because the level of trust you give someone should match the level of loyalty they have actually shown. Not words, demonstrated over time, through actual behavior, when it would have been easier to behave otherwise. The person who has earned your private thoughts is the person who has shown repeatedly and at cost to themselves that they keep them. 9 signs down. If you have been watching this and finding yourself thinking about a specific person, running through this list against someone in your life, I want to tell you something important before we get to the final signs. Seeing these patterns in someone does not mean you immediately cut them off, does not mean you confront them tomorrow. Machiavelli was not in the business of impulsive moves. He was in the business of intelligence, gathering it, holding it, using it at exactly the right moment and not a moment before. What you do with this knowledge matters as much as the knowledge itself. We will talk about that after the last 2 signs. Stay with me. Sign 10. They need your failures to validate their choices. This one requires you to understand something about human psychology that most people find uncomfortable to look at directly. Every person, at some level, constructs a story about why their life is the way it is, why they have what they have, are where they are, have done what they have done. For most people who have played it safe, that story includes a quiet, unspoken chapter that playing it safe was the rational choice, the smart choice, that the people who took bigger swings were either lucky or reckless, and the outcome was never really in their hands. That story is comfortable. It is also stable until you come along and start demonstrating through your actual results that bigger swings are available to whoever has the discipline to take them. Because now there is evidence against the story, and the story needs to defend itself. This is the psychological root of what looks like secret hatred, but is often, at its core, threatened identity. The person does not hate you exactly. They hate what you represent, the possibility that their stillness was a choice, not an inevitability. And so, at some deep and rarely examined level, they need you to fail. Not consciously in most cases, but in the subtle, quiet way that a person roots for an outcome without ever saying it out loud. You will feel this most when you take your biggest risks, when the stakes are highest and the outcome is most uncertain. That is when you will notice who prays with you and who prays against you, and both groups will be using the exact exact same words. Watch the energy, not the words. The energy when you share a risk tells you everything about whether someone is in your corner or quietly calculating what your failure would confirm for them. Sign 11. They give you their full loyalty when you are down and disappear when you rise. Here it is, the final sign. The one Machiavelli called the mark of the most skilled hidden enemy. And the reason it is the most dangerous is that it does not look like hatred at all. It looks like loyalty. It looks like love. And by the time you see it clearly, it has usually been operating for years. This person is the most present in your life when you are struggling, when you are low, confused, uncertain. They are there, calling, checking in, showing up, being exactly what you need. And you are grateful for it, because that level of presence when you are down is rare, and it feels genuine. And in many ways it is genuine. The caring is real. What is also real is the function it serves. Because the moment you start rising, the moment the uncertainty clears and the direction becomes unmistakable, and the results begin to show, they begin to fade. Gradually, without announcement, the calls become less frequent. The warmth becomes slightly more managed. They are still there, technically, but the quality of presence is different. Something has shifted, and if you rise high enough, long enough, consistently enough, they vanish, or they transform into something you do not recognize, critical, distant, occasionally hostile in ways you never saw coming. Machiavelli's explanation for this is clean and devastating. These people were never bonded to you. They were bonded to your need for support, for someone to lean on, for a witness to your difficulty. That need gave them a function, a role, a reason to be central in your life. And as long as you needed them in that specific way, the relationship had warmth and constancy. But someone who is rising needs less rescue and more peers. Not everyone in your life is equipped to be your peer. Some people are only equipped to be your rescue, and when the rescue is no longer required, the relationship has nothing left to run on. This is not always malicious, but it is always costly, because these are often the people you trusted the deepest during the hardest periods of your life. And finding out that the relationship was built on your difficulty, that it cannot survive your success, is one of the most quietly painful realizations you will ever have. Name it, understand it, and do not let the grief of it make you doubt the rising itself, because the rising is right, and the people who were built for it will find you as you go. Now I want to tell you something important, because knowledge without direction is just anxiety with extra steps. You have just been handed a framework for reading the people around you more clearly than you ever have before. That is powerful. It is also dangerous in the wrong hands, meaning in the hands of someone who lets it make them suspicious of everyone, closed to everyone, treating every relationship like a potential threat. That is not what Machiavelli was building toward, and it is not what this is. Here is what you actually do. First, you watch, but you do not act immediately. Machiavelli was explicit that the prince who overreacts to perceived threat is more dangerous to himself than the threat ever was. Seeing one of these signs in someone is not a verdict. It is a data point. You collect data. You notice patterns. You let time do the confirming that your instinct started. Second, you adjust your access, not your attitude. You do not become cold. You do not explode. You do not burn the relationship down the moment you see clearly. You simply, quietly, without announcement, adjust how much access this person has to your real life, your plans, your vulnerabilities, your momentum. They can still be in your world. They just no longer have the keys to the parts of your world that matter most. Third, you build outward at the same time, because the answer to realizing some people around you are not for you is not to shrink your circle. It is to expand it in the right direction, to actively seek and cultivate relationships with people who are energized by your wins, honest with you when it costs them something to be honest, and whose own growth does not feel threatened by yours. Those people exist. They are not as rare as you might think right now. But they are not going to find you in the same rooms as the people on this list. If this video gave you something, a framework, a clarity, a name for something you have been feeling for a long time but could not articulate, I want to ask one thing from you. Hit the like button right now, before the moment passes. It is the simplest signal you can send me that this kind of content is what you want more of, and it is what tells me to keep going deeper. Subscribe. and turn on the notification bell, because what is coming next goes even further into this territory. The strategic, the psychological, the things Machiavelli understood about human nature that nobody else in history documented as clearly or as honestly. If you are not subscribed, the next one will not find you, and you do not want to miss the next one. I want to end this with something that is not about strategy. If you watch this entire video, there is a good chance you have felt some version of this before. That quiet dissonance of being around someone and sensing something was wrong, but not trusting yourself enough to name it. Calling yourself paranoid. Wondering if you were the problem. You were not the problem. Your instincts were working. The data was there. You just did not have the framework to read it clearly. And so you did what most people do. You buried the signal under a more comfortable story. Because the alternative, accepting that someone you trusted had a hidden agenda, is painful in a way that paranoia is not. Paranoia is lonely, but this is a different kind of lonely. The kind that comes from realizing the picture you had of a relationship was never quite the picture the other person was holding. That realization is hard. I am not going to tell you it is not, but here is what I will tell you. The clarity you have now is worth more than the comfort of not knowing. Because the person who can read the room accurately, who can see what everyone else is missing or pretending not to see, is not a victim of their environment. They are a navigator of it. You move differently. You choose differently. You build the kind of circle that actually reflects who you are and where you are going, instead of who you were when you were easiest to be around. You are building that right now by taking this seriously, by being willing to look at uncomfortable things instead of looking away. You are already doing something most people will never do, and that is exactly why your path looks different from most. There is more coming. Next time we go even deeper into the specific moves that Machiavelli outlined for protecting yourself from the people on this list without becoming them in the process. It is one of the most important things we will cover. Make sure you are here for it. I will see you in the next one.